Really quick, if you haven't seen my most recent episode on a brand new exciting card with green slime, make sure you check that episode out because I want to make sure that you do not make this mistake with this brand new card. But don't leave this episode just yet because we've got a brand new card that is going to be, incredibly expensive. I mean, I'm talking about over $1. Okay, I mean, over $1 is out of my budget range for my decks, but yeah, that was a bad joke. It's going to be very, very, very expensive. Anyways, let's jump into it. So the card that I'm talking about on this episode that, yes, is going to be very expensive is Deep Gnome Terramancer. It's a 2/2 gnome wizard with flash that costs 1 and a white, and it says, whenever one or more lands enter the battlefield under an opponent's control without being played, you may search your library for a plains card, put it on the battlefield, tapped, then shuffle. Do this only once each turn. Now, first off, I do want to mention that this card is exclusively in one of the precons, so yeah, it is going to be quite expensive because obviously its print run is not going to be quite as high as if it were in the actual set. Which actually, really quick, okay, quick note. Why are certain cards rares in precons and others mythic rares when obviously they show up at the exact same rate? I'm talking about new cards, sorry, not reprints. Why are some new cards rares and some mythic rares? Someone in the comments, please let me know below, okay? Okay, but back to the actual card. My goodness, is that a good effect. And again, an effect that mono-white decks have been waiting for such a long time. I mean, they keep waiting for these kinds of effects. We're starting to get more of them, yes. But here's the thing. For pretty much all of these kind of cards that help you ramp in mono-white that are good, well, Wizards is kind of taking advantage of the situation by kind of, putting them in specific products or putting them in a certain rarity to be very much chase cards so that you got to pay up to get them. So they're not really solving the issue for the vast majority of mono-white players out there. But look, Wizards is doing it. Oh my goodness, rampant mono-white. Good for you. Okay, soapbox aside, yeah, this is going to see a ton of play. It is going to be one of those cards, which I've said a couple of times, it seems like in the past couple of months. It is going to be very difficult, very, very, very difficult to ever argue against this card in a mono-white deck. Or again, like pretty much all those other cards, I should say budget aside, because yes, this as well as the other cards that, help with either, ramping or drawing in mono white tend to be chase cards that are going to be incredibly expensive, like this one. This one essentially says, hey, are your opponents ramping with lands? Awesome. That means I get to also ramp with lands. But actually, in reality, it really doesn't require ramp at all. And there are certain cards that are played in a ton of decks out there that are also incredibly budget friendly, in which I put in a ton of decks as well, that are going to trigger this. And of course, before you get that first trigger, you can just flash this in. So you're like, okay, yeah, you're doing your thing where you're going to get a land put into play. Cool, I will too. Also, keep in mind, it does not specify basic planes, so it can be other kinds of planes that we'll get to here in a bit. Planes? My bad. Okay, it's been a long day so far. Now, this only triggers once each turn, but still, I mean, you've got the potential to get this trigger, well, technically on your turn as well, though your opponents probably shouldn't be doing that. They might, but yeah, you've got the potential to get this trigger on every single player's turn. So you could basically just, ramp by 4 lands by the next time your turn comes around. And again, this is a 2-mana creature with flash. Now, that being said, let's move on to the cards that this is really going to take advantage of. Because again, this really can benefit off of things that even aren't ramp, like, Evolving Wilds or Terramorphic Expanse, which see a ton of play. I mean, I think last time we looked, Evolving Wilds is around 25% of all decks out there. And Terramorphic Expanse should basically be the exact same because, yeah, both do the exact same thing. But yeah, tap, sacrifice, search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. These lands literally do nothing else but tutor out another land into play. So yeah, your opponent is going to crack one of these, and then you just flash in your gnome, and you're like, Okay, I get a plains now. Thank you so much. And do any other opponents want to play an Evolving Wilds or Temporary Expanse and crack them on their turns too? No? Anyone? Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's not like your opponents are going to choose not to crack these, especially early in the game, because they need to get their lands out. So, yeah, you can just basically get free ramp from your deep Gnome Terramancer again and again and again if your opponents just keep playing fetch lands and need to utilize them. And of course, we just got another fetch land like Riveteer's Overlook, which has, when it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it. When you do search your life for a basic swamp, mountain, or forest card, put on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle your library, and you gain 1 life. So yeah, this and the 4 other lands that came from Streets of New Capenna that essentially do the exact same thing, but for different lands, are fantastic. And yeah, you're probably going to start seeing them in, more and more decks. And also, yeah, the gnome can definitely take advantage of all of that. And then how about Mirror Landscape? I mean, how many times have you seen that card played? Enters the battlefield, tap, taps for a colorless, pay 2, tap, sacrifice it, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards that share your basic land type, put them on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. Yeah, basically ramp on a land. And now when that opponent goes and does that, yeah, sure, they sacrifice 1 land to go get 2, and you only get that trigger once, but that's okay. You still get to ramp with this as well. You are taking so much advantage of every single one of your opponent's fetch lands. And speaking of fetch lands, well, you can take even more advantage of this if, your play group tends to spend up on cards like fetch lands, like the actual ones with Misty Rainforest, which has tap, pay 1 life, sacrifice it, go get a forest or an island, put on the battlefield, then shuffle. So yeah, the more and more fetch lands that your friends play, I mean, the more consistent their decks might be when it comes to being able to fix their mana, but also the more consistent you are with ramping with your new gnome. So thanks for dropping, $20, $30, whatever it is now for a Misty Rainforest. I'm just gonna go get my 5-cent Plains card and put it in play tap. Thank you. Or actually, again, and we'll talk about it here in a bit, you might not be going to go get a 5-cent Plains. But also, like I mentioned earlier, you're also going to be taking advantage of players that are ramping with lands, like, that green player over there that just played a rampant growth. So cool, they went and got themselves a basic land into play tapped. Good for them! And now we also get a 2-2 in play, because we flashed it in, and we go get a plains into play. And then we can just keep ramping whenever our opponents ramp. If with lands, or again when they use fetch lands. So thank you. And of course I could go on and on and on about all the fantastic green ramp cards. I mean, Cultivate, yeah, it goes get you, 1 basic into play tapped, 1 in your hand. Cool. But of course, even outside of green, there are ways to ramp. And no, I'm not going to put Wayfarer's Bauble on this screen to show that players can take advantage of Wayfarer's Bauble with this gnome. No. You stay away from my Bauble, gnome. Anyways, Solemn Simulacrum, Sad Robot, of course, is another way to land ramp. That is not Wayfarer's Bauble. When it enters the battlefield, you may search life for a basic land card, put that card on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle your library. So yeah, if you're playing against Sad Robot, or yes, Wayfarer's Bauble, you can also take advantage of that player and, they're ramping by getting even more lands into play with your gnome. You can also really take advantage of a situation, though, with a card like Path to Exile. It has exile target creature. Its controller may search the library for a basic land card, put that card on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle their library. So for 1 mana, you are getting rid of an opponent's creature. They can choose, which they generally do, to go get that basic land into play tapped. And again, if they do that with your new gnome, you're like, awesome, I just paid 1 mana to get rid of your creature. Sure, I ramped you, but I also ramped myself because now I have another plains into play tapped. Thank you, me. Speaking of thank you, me, there's even some lands that can help you out, like Ghost Quarter. It can tap for a color, so you can tap and sacrifice it to destroy target land. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle their library. So you can just, for free, knock out an opponent's land. Yes, you do lose a land in the process, but, if they decide to go get a land, you also get to go get a land. So it's just like, hey, do you want to replace this Ghost Quarter with a plains? And your opponent has to, replace their land with a basic? So yeah, there's a lot of different ways that you can really take advantage of this gnome's trigger. Now, one thing to keep in mind, though cards like Explore and Growth Spiral are very, very similar, one of them works with this gnome and one does not. Explore says you may play an additional land this turn, draw a card. Growth Spiral says, draw a card. You may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. The vast majority of the time, these are basically the exact same thing, though yes, Growth Spiral is at instant speed, but okay, bear with me anyways. Most of the time, these are basically the exact same thing, but with this card, Explore does not work with the gnome. Growth Spiral does work with the gnome, because again, it does specifically say, whenever one or more lands enter the battlefield in opponent's control without being played. Obviously, Explore explicitly says on it, play an additional land, whereas Growth Spiral's like, no, you're not playing it, you're just actually taking it from your hand and putting it into play, which is basically playing it, but not really. So yeah, just make sure you're aware of that. Now, I have referenced this a couple of times in this episode so far, but yeah, I mean, it does not specify on your new gnome that it has to be a basic plains. It can be any kind of plains. So even a budget land like Arctic Treeline can be very impactful with that. It's like, all right, yeah, let's just go get some mana fixing, essentially. Instead of just being a basic plains, you can now instead fix some mana. And speaking of fixing mana, yeah, I mean, for the Triomes, that's going to be pretty huge as well. If you've got Triomes in your deck, have fun getting all your Plains Triomes out with this gnome. Indatha Triome has a Plains Swamp Forest, so yeah, all three of those types, including obviously Plains, enters the battlefield tapped again, tap for any of those colors. And then, of course, Shocklands are an option as well. A Plains Swamp like Godless Shrine, you can go get that, sure. Or if you just want to chuck a ton of money at something, sure, Alpha Duels, why not? But yeah, just make sure you keep in mind that you are not limited to just basic plains, though again, that's still an incredibly powerful effect to go and getting basic plains over and over again with this gnome. You can go get dual lands as well. Or again with triomes or tricycles or whatever we're calling them, you know what I mean. Now when it comes to commanders that are going to want this brand new card, again, it is going to be incredibly difficult for any mono white deck out there outside of budget considerations to argue against using this card. That just seems to be the way that Wizards is making these cards these days when it comes to, hey, mono white has a problem. They can't draw or ramp. All right, let's make some very expensive exclusive cards that players have to pay up for to actually get them. Instead of maybe just making, a bunch of, common or uncommon effects that can really help you out. Nope, they're all going to be at rare or in very specific products outside of sets. Okay, off the soapbox again. Yeah, I mean, obviously there are going to be certain mono-white commanders that are going to be able to utilize this more than others. I mean, how about Teshar, Ancestor's Apostle? It has whenever you cast a Historic spell, return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So cool, if you cast an artifact, Legendary or Saga, yeah, you can go get your gnome back. So that you can then ramp further and just show that green player who is boss when it comes to getting lands into play. Next up, another commander that might want to consider this new card is a Hate Bear commander with Gaddock Teeg. Gaddock Teeg is a 2/2 for 2, so a bear, just like our new gnome. I mean, okay, their creature types aren't bears, but you know what I mean. They're 2/2s for 2. In Magic, that's a bear. Regardless, it says non-creature spells converted mana cost 4 or greater can't be cast. Non-creature spells that X their mana cost can't be cast. So Gaddock Teeg decks generally are about just getting a bunch of, hate bears or taxing effects in play to make life pretty difficult for your opponents. And while you're making things more difficult for your opponents, you're also taking advantage of what they are able to do. And again, this gnome is basically like, hey, if you, want to try and ramp, awesome, I'm going to take even more value out of that by also ramping myself. Or again, if you just play a fetch land and crack it, cool, I get to get even further ahead of you as well. So yeah, this new gnome can definitely fit into Hate Bear decks. Now, one thing you are going to want to consider with this new card is obviously, do I have a decent amount of plains in my deck? And if the answer is no, then you might not want to consider it. But if you do, I mean, one commander, that did come to mind. If you do have a decent amount of plains in your deck, whether those, again, are dual lands or the triomes, etc., or just a bunch of plains for whatever reason, Kaneo Sentiro. Kaneo Sentiro says, at the beginning of your end step, draw a card. Each player may put a land card from their hand on the battlefield, then each opponent who didn't draws a card. So a commander like this one is obviously able to incentivize your opponents to potentially get another land into play. And again, they're not playing it, they're putting it from their hand into play, so yeah, if you've got your gnome in play, you're going to get that trigger. So then you can ramp even further, and yeah, again, make sure that obviously if you are going to be utilizing this new gnome in this deck, that you have enough plains. But yeah, in my opinion, this card is going to be quite expensive. Again, it's the type of card that we kind of have been seeing more of lately, where Wizards is like, hey, we're solving the problem. But it's really like, oh, we're taking advantage of the situation and giving cards out there that are definitely going to be chase cards out there, or they're going to be in a product that you have to go buy to actually get this at a decent amount, instead of actually just printing, more of these types of effects. I'm not saying this powerful of an effect, but more of these types of effects, either common or uncommon, in just regular sets, so that players can actually get their hands on them without having to fork over however much money this is going to be, which is going to be, again, quite a bit. But yeah, This is a very good card, especially for mono white decks. And yeah, you can really take advantage of not only, land ramp spells like a Rampant Growth or a Sakura Tri-Baldur, etc., 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 but of course, fetch lands. Evolving Wilds, Temporary Expanse, anything. You can take advantage of those things. And with that, the show is coming to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.